Welcome in everybody to the 9th video in my 12-part rookie profile series. We're still talking through this second tier of players at the wide receiver position, and we're going to be talking about my rookie wide receiver 5, my 1.09 in one quarterback leagues and 2.01 in superflex leagues, and that's Boston College wide receiver Zay Flowers. Looking at Flowers' college career, he began as a freshman in 2019 and caught 22 passes for 341 yards and 3 touchdowns. It wasn't really a big season production-wise, but that was good enough to be the third receiving option on the team behind a junior Kobe White and tight end Hunter Long. He also recorded 27 rush attempts for another 200 yards and a touchdown, so he showed versatility in that regard too, as just a playmaker that Boston College wanted to get the ball to. In 2020, this was Flowers' breakout season with 892 yards and 9 touchdowns on 56 receptions. The offense this year for Boston College was Zay Flowers and Hunter Long this season, as they were the only two players with more than 35 receptions on that team. Unfortunately, though, Flowers regressed his junior year down to 746 yards and 5 touchdowns on 44 receptions, still very easily leading the team in every single statistical category for receiving, especially since Hunter Long is no longer on the team. He left for the NFL, but it just wasn't the season that we wanted to see after his sophomore 2020 season. But then in 2020, as a senior, Flowers dominates across the board, 78 receptions for almost 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns. This was the type of season that we needed to see from Flowers that really put him on the map as a top 5 receiver prospect in this year's class. So moving over to the analytics, let me remind you of my 16 marker system for evaluating wide receiver prospects, which is just a series of baselines that I want players to hit based on what previously successful players in the NFL had coming out of college. And for reference, my wide receiver 1, Jackson Smith-Njigba, will be at 8 out of 16 markers. Quentin Johnston is at 10 out of 16. Jordan Addison at 7 out of 16, and Josh Downs hitting on 9 out of these 16 markers. Before continuing though, I wanted to mention that if you like this content and want to support what we're doing on this channel, please consider joining our YouTube memberships, where you will gain access to additional videos every single month, including a bank of 7 videos that you can watch already. Plus, we will be starting exclusive live streams when we have enough members, and I just posted a link to a Google Sheet that houses all of the data that I'm looking at for my marker system, everything that you want for running backs and wide receivers. It's all in that Google Sheet. So if you want access to all of that, check out the link in the description down below. Join the bonus content tier, and thank you guys for checking it out. So taking a look at Zay Flowers specifically, he is currently sitting at 7 out of 16 markers, and then we'll go to 8 out of 16 after he's drafted in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. Now, if you watched my video on Josh Downs, then you already know the story for Flowers too, because there really isn't that much difference between the two. In fact, I've been calling Flowers discount Josh Downs basically all draft season, but I guess since the community now just seems to prefer Flowers more, I should be calling Josh Downs the discount Zay Flowers. But I think that's a good place to start, so let's start there. Why do I prefer Josh Downs to Zay Flowers? And I think the biggest reason for me is early declare versus 4th year. And you may smirk at that and think that that's a silly reason, but there is merit behind that. There's a reason why we prefer our receivers to be early declares. They have a better hit rate overall in the NFL. There's actually a fantastic article by Rich Rebar on Sharp Football Analysis breaking all of this down specifically. But here's the chart of early declare versus non-early declare receivers drafted between 2010 to 2019 in the first 3 rounds that went on to have fantasy success. As you can see, there's a huge difference in hit rates at all 3 levels. Top 36, the hit rate drops from 55% for early declares down to 30% for non-early declares. Top 24, 44% down to 19%, and top 12 wide receiver 1 seasons, 27% down to 7%. And there's an even bigger disparity when you filter down to just first round receivers over that same time frame, as top 24 drops from 64% down to just 11%, and top 12 goes from 40% down to 0. The only non-early declare receiver drafted in round 1 in the 2010s and had a top 24 season was Devontae Parker, and that was actually in his 5th year in the league. Now, since that article was released, we can add 4 more names to this list for non-early declares, and that's Deebo Samuel, who had a wide receiver 1 season in 2021. Chase Claypool in 2020 had a top 24 season. Michael Pittman also just had a top 24 season in 2022. and Devonta Smith had a top 12 season also just this past year in 2022. But that still shows you the improbability of a 4th or 5th year receiver actually having meaningful fantasy success at the NFL level. I'm not saying that it's impossible. I'm just showing you that he's already behind the 8 ball there that Josh Downs isn't. Downs also had much better college production than Zay Flowers, not just raw statistical numbers. I'm talking team adjusted as well. Downs posted a better yards per team pass attempt number in their best and final seasons, better market share of yards numbers in their best seasons, as well as higher target share, yards per route run, and targets per route run in their best seasons too. They both broke out in their sophomore seasons. Both are basically the same size at 5'9", around 180 pounds. Flowers is a little bit faster from his 40 time, but Downs wins in explosiveness and burst with a better vertical and broad jump. So are you starting to see why these players are basically the same prospect, but I prefer Josh Downs because he's coming into the NFL 1 year earlier? The only real advantage that I think Flowers will have is it seems like he's locked in as a 1st round pick in the NFL this year, and Downs is most likely going to be an early to mid 2nd round pick. So there is that, but I don't know how much that really matters because Flowers has all the same problems as Downs in his translation to the NFL, which is primarily that size. I talked a lot more about this in the Josh Downs video that I did, but the NFL is prejudiced against smaller receivers. Literally the closest comp that comes up for Flowers is also another comp for Josh Downs, and that's Wan'Dale Robinson. You also have Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, and again, the same ceiling comp player of Tyler Lockett, who coincidentally was also a 4-year player, turning 23 years old during his rookie season, just like Zay Flowers. Those players essentially create a range of outcomes for Zay Flowers. But I think there is one nice benefit to Zay Flowers' profile that Josh Downs really doesn't have though, and we can actually use that to help separate out these NFL comps, and that's college utilization playing on the outside. Because for being the same size, Downs and Flowers were not utilized the same in college. Downs was almost strictly a slot wide receiver, playing in the slot 82% of the time in 2022, 95% of the time in 2021, according to Pro Football Focus. That is a lot more similar to those guys like Elijah and Rondale Moore, Wan'Dale Robinson, who are all primarily slot guys in college, and that also seemed to have translated to the NFL, where unfortunately they're just primary slot guys. Flowers, however, only played in the slot 32% of the time in 2022, with his highest slot rate being at 48% back in 2020. Those numbers are actually a lot more similar to Tyler Lockett, who played in the slot just 15% of the time in his final season, and that usage in college has seemed to translate to the NFL, where Tyler Lockett does get a lot more run on the outside than a lot of other receivers his size, and that has helped him in terms of just fantasy production and ceiling, as we know that players on the outside get better opportunity for better deep balls, more touchdown opportunities, all the stuff that we care about for fantasy points. That is why Tyler Lockett is reaching the ceilings and the levels that we are seeing from him from fantasy production. Those numbers for Flowers, though, also align with another former 1st round pick, and it really shows the floor for Zay Flowers, and that's Philip Dorsett, who was in the slot 23% of the time in his final season, also his 4th season in college too, before being drafted in the 1st round by the Indianapolis Colts and then just never really doing anything in the NFL. So there is that too. But Zay Flowers, just more ifs and buts and hopefullys for another receiver in this class, which leads me to once again saying, for what feels like the 100th time so far this year, that if you have a rookie pick that you're thinking is going to be Zay Flowers or any other receiver in this tier like Quentin Johnston, Addison, Downs, Hyatt, even any of those guys, just add something to that pick and move up to go get Jackson Smith-Njigba. There's really the only takeaway for me from this wide receiver class is I just want Jackson Smith-Njigba. I just want to pay up to go get him. I don't really want anybody else, and that is including Zay Flowers. But if you found this video first and you did miss my profile on my 1.08 wide receiver 4 in this class, Josh Downs, and I go more in depth in that video into why the size concerns are real for him and Zay Flowers as well too, then you can watch that video right up here.